everybody. In today's video lesson, we're going to talk about weaving support into your argumentative writing and citing it properly. In this lesson, we're going to cover the following. First, we're going to talk about the purpose and placement of source material in an argument. Next, we're going to talk about how a citation and a works cited page work hand in hand with one another. Finally, we're going to talk about how to cite source material within the signal phrase, which should be a review, and how to cite source material through in-text parenthetical citation. You'll have access to this slide presentation after this video, as well as other formal note pages within Canvas, providing all of this information to you again. Let's begin with the purpose and placement of source material in an argument paragraph. Okay, we've got two examples that are portions of a paragraph. A. Kuo and Taylor, 2004, found that, quote, exposure to ordinary natural settings in the common course of after-school and weekend activities may be widely effective in reducing attention deficit symptoms in children. This shows that parents and caregivers should consider gardening with children. Okay, let's look at B. Another benefit to gardening with kids is that it can actually positively affect a child's academic performance. Studies show that spending time in green spaces can increase a child's ability to focus. A study conducted by Kuo and Taylor, 2004, found that exposure to ordinary natural settings in the course of common after-school and weekend activities may be widely effective in reducing attention deficit symptoms in children. So you may notice that in this first example, which was letter A, the writer doesn't assert her own argument. She asserts somebody else's research and then she just agrees with it. This is something that your instructors see new writers do all the time, and maybe it's that people don't feel confident enough in their opinion or their right to speak their point of view, that writers will put somebody else's research first and then they'll just agree with it. Your instructors would like to encourage you to instead assert your own opinion and use source material to support that opinion. So let's look at the other sample again. You'll notice it opens with a topic sentence. Another benefit to gardening with kids is that it can actually positively affect a child's academic performance. And now the writer is going to support that idea with another claim and that research. Studies show that spending time in green spaces can increase a child's ability to focus. Oh, okay. How do we prove that it can increase a child's ability to focus? A study conducted by Kuo and Taylor, 2004, found that exposure to ordinary natural settings in the course of common after-school and weekend activities may be widely effective in reducing attention deficit symptoms in children. So you could see, like I said, here the author establishes his argument with a topic sentence and then supports that topic sentence with research. This is what your teachers are looking for. We want you to create an argument that you believe in and find source material that supports what you have to say. Okay, let's move on to in-text citations and works cited pages. There's an old song that says, "They go together like a horse and carriage, you can't have one without the other." You may recall it was also used in a old comedy show. But this is how I want you to think of in-text citations and works cited pages. They come as a pair. You have to have both. To avoid plagiarism, you need to do two things. First, you need to use in-text citations. You must attribute the quotation, the summary, or the paraphrase within the essay. Who said it, who wrote it, or who conducted the study. And you need a works cited page. And as an aside, we call it a works cited page because we're using MLA style. If you were using APA style or Chicago Manual, you would call it something different. But it's all the same idea. You give the bibliographic information for that source on the works cited page. So let's say that somebody is reading your paper and they think the research that you're using is really cool and they would like to read that research. Well, they're going to go to your works cited page and you'll have provided all the information that they need to find that source again so that they could read it too. Okay, let's move on to part 3, a review of how to cite sources in your essay. And when your teachers use the word cite, they mean when you attribute authorship. Who said it, who wrote it, who thought it. When we use the word cite, that's what we mean. Okay, how and when to cite sources in your essay. Some of this is going to be a review for you. You have notes in Canvas that you can return to after you've watched this presentation, and I encourage you to do so. Go refresh your memory and make sure you're feeling really good on this topic. So first, cite anything that is not common knowledge, and cite ideas that are not your own. Cite quotations, summaries, and paraphrased material. And always weave a quotation or a paraphrase into your writing using a signal phrase. So that signal phrase are the words that are your words that encase that quotation or lead into that quotation for your reader. Number 4, there are 3 ways to cite the material. You can do it entirely in the signal phrase. We've talked about this in class. You could do it entirely within the parentheses. We've not talked about this yet. Or for print sources, you could do a little bit here and a little bit there. You could cite it partially in the signal phrase and partially in the parentheses. Usually that would be with a print source. You would follow up with that page number in the parentheses. Okay, let's look at some examples. So I know all of you are having a great time using the GCC AZ library database, and you're finding great sources there, but you may find that you want to pull a few sources from the internet as well. And of course, you're going to crap test those, CRAAP, to make sure that they are good, strong sources that are reliable. And once you've done that, you're going to need to weave them into your paper. So let's look at a couple of examples of how somebody would weave web source material into their paper. So our first example is attributing authorship or citing entirely in the signal phrase. According to Mark Bittman in his TED Talk titled, "What's Wrong with What We Eat?" there's no question, none, that so-called lifestyle diseases, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some cancers, are diseases that are far more prevalent here than anywhere in the rest of the world, and that's the direct result of eating a Western diet. Okay, so we've got the author's first name and last name and the title of the TED Talk within that signal phrase. That is sufficient for attributing authorship. The reader would have no trouble finding that source on the Works Cited page to follow up and watch that TED Talk on his or her own. Let's see what it would look like if we cited entirely within the parentheses. Of course, you're still going to need a signal phrase. The Western diet, also referred to as the standard American diet, leads to, quote, lifestyle diseases such as, quote, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some cancers. And then we have in the parentheses there just his last name and then a period. Why do we have just his last name? Why don't we have a random page number? Why don't we have the URL? Well, MLA 8 likes to keep it simple, and web sources do not have page numbers, and so we don't need that. And putting a URL in can be really clunky and really disruptive to the reader, so we just include the author's last name when we're citing a web source. Okay, let's look at print sources. So we're going to use the same author, Mark Bittman. So let's look at how it would look if we quoted from him and we put the entire source citation in the parentheses. Of course, we're still going to need a signal phrase, a little lead in to the quotation, but all of that attribution of authorship is going to be in the parentheses. The way we raise meat and grow produce in America has contributed to, quote, climate change and stimulated a fundamental change in our diets that has contributed to being overweight, even obese, and more susceptible to diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and perhaps even cancer. And then you can see in the parentheses, we have his last name, no comma, and then the page number. So you'll notice here, though, that we have a period at the end. Usually at the end of a sentence, we like to put a period right here. However, when we're citing something, we're going to move that period after the parentheses. Let's look at what it would look like if we wanted to split up our parenthetical citation, give a little bit of the information in the signal phrase and a little bit of the information in the parentheses. According to Mark Bittman, in the book Food Matters, 2008, industrialized meat production has contributed to climate change and stimulated a fundamental change in our diets that has contributed to being overweight, even obese, and more susceptible to diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and perhaps even cancer. You can see here at the end that we just have the page number here, because we have Bittman here, page number here, Up here, we do it all in the parentheses, Bitman 2. One more time, I just want you to see these are the only ways that parenthetical citations can look. You can have, for a print source, you could have the author's last name and the page number, no comma, period at the end. If we have a web source that has an author, but there are no page numbers for a web source, you're just going to put that author's last name and then a period. And then lastly, if you have a web source without an author, which happens sometimes if you're on a government web page or something like that, if you don't have an author, you include a snippet of the article title in quotation marks within the parentheses. And again, the period is at the end. So it would look like this. Signal phrase, quote or paraphrase, Bitman 2. Signal phrase, quote or paraphrase, Bitman. Or signal phrase, quote or paraphrase, farm groups within quotation marks. So that's basically the formula. If you really want to break it down, you could plug your ideas in there. According to so-and-so, quotation, period. In summary, use source material to support your argument. Weave source material into your paper using summaries, paraphrases, and direct quotations. Always tell who is responsible for those words or ideas within the paper in the signal phrase or within the parenthetical citation. Give all bibliographic information for those sources on a works cited page. If you need help with your works cited page, check out the GCC AZ Library Citation Help page. And here is a hyperlink, which you can't use in a video, but you could use when you see these notes on your own computer. And I highly recommend using a citation generator like Cite to properly format your citation entry for each source. I'll follow up with a works cited page quick review video, but for now, those source links should get you where you need to go. As always, if you have any questions or issues or you need a little extra support, contact your instructor. We're here to help you out. And nerds that we are, we think this is fun. So definitely throw your questions our way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Canvas.